So we began this video side by side to one of the most rarest BMWs ever made. Not one, but two, 850 CSI. The S is very important. So let's talk about how innovative this 8 Series was back in the 80s. And let's talk also about the engine under the hood here. Legend said that this is the same engine that we can get on the Mclaren F1. But before we begin this video, considering subscribing to this channel right now, if you like this kind of content with very rare and special cars, and don't forget to like this video if you like the 8 Series. We love that here. Come with us. So first, we must talk about the 8 Series. It was a new flagship model, the top of the line, where BMW created to be the flagship, the innovative and the carrier of the new technologies that the other lines, the other cars would have in the future. And this is one of the most unknown BMW models that we have here, especially in Brazil. When you park at the gas stations, a lot of the comments came from, oh, I never knew this car even existed. And really, BMW put a lot of effort on developing this new flagship model. They began on the end of 1980, and on 1988, 8 years after, the first model came off from the factory. So BMW was very successful on creating a new model and new technologies. This car really represents and delivers it, but in the commercial department, not so much. This car was very expensive back then, which made it one of the rarest BMWs ever made. So maybe the most striking feature of the 8 Series is its exterior design. Resembles very much the Italian counterparts back then on the 80s, and here we have a very interesting mixture of very elegant lines and hidden in between who have more muscular forms. It is like if Gisele Bündchen was going under a very hypertrophy training. And this was also one of the first cars that were developed and designed with the help of computer-aided designs. Let's just remember that we are back on the 80s, so they were much like the Space Invaders video games. But the objective here was to design the shapes and the exterior to be the most aerodynamic possible. And they made it. This is a 0.29 of aerodynamic coefficient. This is very aerodynamic. Anything below 0.3 is on the airplane side of aerodynamics. And not by chance. The form that this car cuts the atmosphere was very well thought. Just pay attention how the hood is very long and low. Here on the edge of the knife, at the front of the car, we have a lot of air intake. So we have the main air intake for the engine. We have some front cooling ducts for the front brakes. We also have a lot of entrances for the radiators, the auxiliary radiators and the engines as well. And pay attention to this, the small front rims. Look at those. See how elegant and harmonious they are on this very striking feature of BMW designs. Very different from what we've been seeing coming off of the factories today. And here at the front, we also have another component that has an aerodynamic function. The pop-out headlights. And the whole headlight assembly of this car is very complex. Probably one of the most complex headlight systems back then. We have a lot of going on here. On the bumper, we have the exposed side, where we have a city light and a flash-to-plus high beam light, okay? And when the headlight assembly is up, we have also 3 more light sources. We have a high beam with a reflector, we have a fog light, and a low beam light with an ellipsoid. Very, very beautiful. Here on the back, we also have the traditional L-shaped taillights of the BMWs hidden because of this new insert here. So we have a whole new rear taillight design. We also have this voluptuous rear bumper with a rear spoiler inset in the middle. And we also have the quad rounded exhaust tips, which began here on the 850 and was a feature of the next BMW M models. Also, take a look at this car's side at this angle. See how we have a kind of a body kit here of a much more muscular forms here on the rear axle and the front axle that gives this volume, this muscular shape to it. Also, being the BMW rear traction-oriented car, we also have another striking feature of the designs on the wheels. These are the M parallels, very famous wheels back then, on the 90s actually. And we have a 245/40 18 by 8 inch wheel on the front. And here on the back, we have a 285/35 18 on 9.5 inches of wheel diameter. This is very, very interesting. See how we have this lip here and the offset is inside the wheel, which gives all of this volume and shape and emphasis to the rear traction of this car. We could stop there, but there is more. There is a hidden design feature here that I didn't talk about yet. First, let's look at the car at this side and appreciate the harmonious design of the whole shape of the car. Look at the long hood, the low ceiling, and the very short rear of the car. And hidden here, we can reveal the feature. I have to get inside and lower the windows, and the car doesn't have the B-pillar. Here in the interior, a lot of striking features as well. First, on the dash, we usually have the heavy counter and the speed usually separate on the BMW's models. Here they were integrated on a 8 shape, so a resemblance to the 8 series, right? There is a lot of equipment and new technologies here. We have electric adjusting steering wheel. We have this huge sofas with electric adjustments as well. And we have here the most technological computer back then, which is the MID, or the multi-information display, with a lot of features as well. We can see here the bed consumption, actually. The distance, we can also set the timer for the fans of the cabin to go on if you have the car parked somewhere. The climate control also is a dual zone, which is controlled by these Oreo cookies. And we also have a lot of integrated systems here. And here in the middle of all of these new technologies, we have an old gear lever. It goes until the 6th gear, and this is the first 6 manual transmission mounted to a V12 engine. Let's talk about the V12. So here we have the Mclaren F1 engine. Okay, let's stop talking about this, okay? This is not the Mclaren engine, okay? But there are some similarities in between them. We have the same number of cylinders, 12 here and 12 on the Mclaren F1. We also have the same engine designation. It's called the S70. And also, they were made by the same father, the legendary Paul Roche. Okay, this is not the Mclaren engine, right? This is not gold, this is aluminum, and this is fabric. And I must say that BMW didn't make a V12 engine back on the Second World War on the aircraft side engines, much bigger than these ones. But what they did, they took the 6-cylinder engines that they have, which was called M20, and they made a V12 version of it for the 750i. So it was a very basic engine made to be reliable and made to have low torque on the low rev side to move the humongous mass of the 750 from inertia, okay? So they did the M70 V12. It was not a 6.1 liters engine, it was only a 5-liter engine. It had a single camshaft engine heads with only 2 valves per cylinder. It was a very low compression engine with a 8.8 to 1 compression ratio, and also very restrictive and very basic engine, not made for motorsport, not made for 0 to 100 figures, or to be sportive or to have sportness. It made 300 horsepower and delivered 500 Newton meters of torque on the lower side of the revs. But this is not the M70 engine. Yeah, this is the S70 engine. The S comes from Sport, which is performance, right? So you can read it here, powered by M. So what the engineers at the M department back on BMW did was try to bring this engine to the sportiveness side, you know? What they did here was actually try to, on a low-cost modifications basis, try to raise the power output of the engine. So what they did here was to raise the displacement from 5.0 to 5.6. They made it with a longer stroke and bore size. They altered the compression ratio from 8.8 to 1 to 9.8 to 1, still kind of low for gasoline. And they also tried to raise the rev limit a little bit and changed the camshafts for a better efficiency on the higher RPMs. In the end, we are talking about an engine that produces 380 horsepower, 80 horsepower more than the M70, and also 5 kilograms of torque or 50 Newton meters of torque more than the 500 on the M70. It's still not that of a performance engine, but it is here. The S70 V12 is one of the rarest engines made on BMW. Only 1,500 units were made. This engine only came on the A50 CSI, only on the S model, and here in Brazil we only have 7 cars that came to Brazil, and here we have 2 of those. Not bad. So, you wouldn't expect to open a hood from a 30-year car and see the engine bay as it sits right now, right? When we first received this car, everything was pretty much shot. A lot of dirt, a lot of leaks, a lot of oxidation, and even some parts were decomposing, okay? This is pretty much a nightmare to any technician. And this is the result, what you're seeing right now in the video, of days, weeks, and months of hard labor and work to restore this engine. So just to list a few of the problems that we have to solve here. On the leak department at the front side of the engine, where the timing chain is located, everything was leaking. So also on the back side of the engine, near the firewall and the transmission, everything was leaking. And then we also have the ignition components. They were glued together because they were broke on previous maintenance. We are not sure what happened there. And also, all of the hydraulics lines were pretty much leaking as well. And the steering box was also leaking on its carcass. The clutch was bad. It was partially repaired. Lambda sensors, the O2 sensors, were from an Audi. And we also had the injectors. They were pretty much unequal. Very bad. But not only the engine, the S70, was the feature of the CSI. We also had brake upgrades with floating discs and 4 pistons calipers. We also have inside all of the gimmicks, all of the details that the BMW M cars had, with red needles on the dash, the red stitching on the steering wheel, and red stripes on the gear knob. And also the suspension was a little lower and stiffer. But the most impressive feature of the CSI only came here was the rear steering axle, which was called AHK. Take a look at this manual here. So this is the Active Hinterachs Kinematic, or the AHK, the rear steering system that came on this car. Everything is in German here. It's very difficult to understand if you don't speak German. But we can see the complexity of the rear axle with all of these arms and components here. And in the middle, we also had the actuator, which actuated the 2 steering of the rear wheels, and we have the steering angle modifier. Here also we have the hydraulic and electric system. All of the geometry of the rear axle explained here. Here is the actuator actuating on the lower control arm, which made the wheel to spin, to steer. We also have the pumps. It was a tandem pump, a piston, and a kind of a flap pump, 2 pumps in one axle. So the idea here was not a performance, but a security, a safety system to help you not lose, not to oversteer the car on curves. And it gave the car a more steeper angle on the curves, and it was very, very responsive. All of this back in '95. So to talk about the main disappointment about the 850, we have to talk about the elephant in the room. Because this guy weighs as much as an elephant. So the weight is the main limiting factor of the performance of this car. Is it a bad thing? Yeah, well, they couldn't get rid of it since they were adding all of these features, all of the luxury features, all of the design features, like this B-pillar-less feature here adds a lot of weight to the car to make it rigid. So in the end, the equilibrium between performance and luxury and driving experience, which was an old BMW Moto, not anymore, is what held this car to be an all-time epic. It doesn't mean that this car isn't pleasurable. The main aspiration is this, the GT side of it. So a highway, high speeds, we can talk about it. The rear axle really helps you to change lanes, to make this car stable. Actually, it is very stable, this car. Even on corners, you can feel a very confident ride regarding to the suspension setup when it's working properly, of course. And we also must talk about the engine roar, or the engine sound. Here we have a modified exhaust. This is a Brazilian exhaust made by Secret Weapon, and this is one of the first prototypes back before, when they were still working with stainless steel. Okay, now they only work with titanium. It is another level of finish and of sound finish. But here we can hear actually the secret of the feature of this exhaust, which is this high-pitched kind of wail that you get from this exhaust. So it's good to see a secret exhaust feature on such a car, such a magnificent ride as well, a true GT ride. It fits very well to the whole package here. It's high-pitched, doesn't bother us, it isn't that loud, but gives this experience that the car is even faster than it is. Not bad. So in the end of the 80s and in the beginning of the 90s, if you wanted the rarest, the most expensive and the most technological BMW ever made, you were buying an 850 CSI. But 30 years after, does it really make sense to own such a gas-guzzling, underpowered behemoth like this one? Let me know in the comments. This video ends here. I'm Guilherme, and this 850 CSI is mine.